So I'll go down the line and ask the panelists to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your role, and then the prompt for your question. If you had to describe your OSPO, what it is, what it's about, and what it does to someone in your institution who has no idea about open source, where would you start and what would you say? So David, we'll start with you.
My name is David Lippert. I'm the director of the George Washington University Open Source Program Office. To answer that question, a lot of people don't know what open source is at all. So we're based in the library. I plant the flag for all things open. And yeah, I just start from, we're here to help you share knowledge better.
Thank you. Hey everybody, Zach Chandler from Stanford University. I'm with the Center for Open and Reproducible Science. So we're within a Center for Data Science and AI. Engaging with somebody new on campus, that's something we do all the time. People still find us, discover us. Usually it's by a referral. My colleague Francesca is here as well. So we have 2,300 faculty members, 2,500 postdocs, 7,000 sponsored projects at any one time. Everyone is writing code. Mostly this is Python and R. Lots of these are niche projects. Some of them are not. Some of them get actually quite big and influential. We also have the challenge of dealing with a computer science department that really knows what they're doing. So one of our challenges at first was like, can we even help these people? Turns out we can. So one of the things we found is that the role of coding lead for a lab, so this could be cutting edge science, but maybe not cutting edge code, can be a lonely job. This is sometimes a grad student, sometimes a postdoc, but also we have professional research software engineers inside these labs. But they don't have a peer in their group. So the first offer we make to campus is to provide community for the coding leads from across campus. And then bring them together. So we have this group called the Maintainers and Contributors Roundtable, and that's probably one of the best things we've done. So that if I was engaging somebody new, I would want to know who their coding lead is and to let them know that we exist and we're here for them. So it's a community practice. They learn from each other. And we also help with things like consultations. We have a projects registry to elevate all the, so we have like 100 or so projects that we've discovered that are what we call notable, and we make the faculty tell us what that means. I'm not going to tell you your project's notable or not. And we award an open source prize. So this was an afterthought after we launched our OSPO. We weren't funded for it, but I was talking to Josh. I was like, hey Josh, I have this idea. Should we name this prize after someone? He's like, don't name it after a person. And I'm like, I was really grateful for that advice. It was totally true. So yeah, we're about elevating research software as a first-class research output. We want to advocate for researchers and software developers inside the academy.
Thanks, Zach. Vessela.
Hi everyone, I'm Vessela Ensberg. I'm located at the library of the University of California in Davis, but we are part of the UC OSPO network, which is somewhat different from the previous instances of OSPOs, where we have 6 campuses working together, and not all campuses have OSPOs in their universities. So we're organized around themes. Our themes are discovery, education, and sustainability. So we help discover who across our institutions are engaged in open source development. We catalog and review and educate students, faculty, staff about open source. And we also collect best practices, grow a community, because community is key to reaching sustainability for any open source project, as well as help facilitate interactions between the different groups on campus, decision makers, and the different universities and the central system, help them understand what open source is and why it matters to our researchers. So I know it's longer than one sentence, but can I claim 6 sentences because we're 6
Doesn't if you can't represent it.
No, I think it's great. And in the opening sessions, one of the points that Claire made a point to make is that there's really not, OSPOs are not, they're very unique to each other. No two tend to look alike. And I think that's well represented in the panel up here. The great thing about today is we know that we have a mix of people who are aspiring to start open source program offices in their institutions and a mix of people who've already been there. And so I'll toss out back to the panel. For the people who are aspiring to start one or trying to start one up, what's one thing that you would recommend that they do in the beginning?
So I'm new to academia and open source. I just started just over 2 years ago. So if I can do it, like anybody can do it. I have confidence in that. The Curious Network has a lot of fantastic information. I would start with the academic OSPO definition paper, and it's about 20 pages. It's a great introduction to what OSPOs can do, and then you can kind of figure out like what you want your OSPO to do. And then I'll just stop at one.
I love that, and the statement you made about it. If I did it, I was new to it 2 years ago. I think is sort of the secret of open source that people who aren't involved in it don't understand. There's this impression that it's like the biggest, best, brightest minds in the world, and it must be this tall to ride. And certainly there are a lot of the biggest and best minds in the world. It's just made by the people who show up. Right, and so showing up to do the work, that's where you start. And so I love that answer.
When I was hired, I didn't know what a copyleft license was, and Professor Lorena Barba, who wrote the grant, said, I can teach him.
Yeah.
So,
Her team wrote a great guide about 10 years ago that's still maybe the best guidance we have. I guess I would say faculty buy-in matters quite a lot. So we kicked off with support of about 25 faculty members. These are, because our faculty are very busy people. They will not necessarily answer just anybody's email, but they do respond to each other. So if you want to crack into researcher culture, helps to have one with you leading this to start. And I would also say that one of the important parts for us is we don't have a compliance function. It's not our business to tell somebody what license to use. We can guide them. So we also don't have any lawyers on staff. So we can guide them about the ramifications of their choices, but ultimately the choice is up to them. That's a different office. That's the Office of Technology Licensing that wants to tell them which license to use, not us. We tried that in the beginning, and I think we quickly alienated one of our key computer science faculty members who probably wouldn't open our next email because we were trying to tell him that like the Express patent grant and Apache 2 is something that he shouldn't be using. He's like, oh, I'm putting you in the ignore column. So we stopped doing that, and that helped a lot once we sort of realized that we didn't really need to have a compliance function.
I would say find your stakeholders, and among those stakeholders, you're going to have champions, and you're going to have allies, and you'll find them not just among your researchers, but among your staff and administration, and all of them are very important in helping your next steps.
Awesome. Thank you. And for the folks in the audience, I've got a timer running on my wrist here. We're going to do panel questions that I guide for about 8 minutes, and then we're going to take questions from the audience for about the last 20. So be thinking about the burning questions that you have for the panel. For the folks who are trying to get their OSPO started, they follow your advice. They found the right home also in the university, and they've gotten sort of blessing to start. What do you think is the most important thing for them to do in the first 90 days?
I have to start all the time.
No. I'll toss it to Zach.
Random access. I would say kick it off in some way so that you're visible. One of the best things you can do is persist and plant a flag in the ground. Because if you become the titular home for open source on campus, people will find you, and surprising ones will find you. But that takes time. So I would say start that immediately so that like that clock starts ticking, and then you'll gradually accrue this reputation so that the person who finds you in 9 months, you won't have started on day 90, start on day 1 on like planting the flag.
I think it really depends on what prep work you've done before you found your OSPO, right? You should know who else in your university is working on open source and in what way. Very engaging. And you should compile a mailing list and start gathering your community and talking to them about their needs.
The best things I did were reach out to the other curious members and ask them for help. So I copied Zach's project registry and his student award program, almost word for word, just changed Stanford to GW. Thank you.
Really available, man.
Saeed was incredibly helpful at like helping me navigate the conversations and pointing me to the right people. Lorena, who had written the grant, did a phenomenal job of already identifying those key advocates. So we quickly built a stakeholder group and let them know that we are a services organization, and you get to help define what this organization is. So we like brought them in and said, what do you want us to do? And had those conversations early. And then, yeah, to your point, we built a website. Like that's the first thing I was trying to do was get all these. What are our initiatives? What are we doing? Let's build a website so that we can put our face out to the world and have a mission.
And you seem less crazy when there's 2 of you. Yes. So don't show up by yourself.
The idea of planting a flag and making yourself visible for the other people in your organization who are interested in working in the open is one of the things that I think sort of transcends academic OSPOs, civic OSPOs, and corporate OSPOs, right? As soon as you sort of say, I'm the person that's leading this charge, all kinds of interesting people will come out of the woodwork who want to work open or have ideas. And sometimes they're not necessarily from the open source world. There may be an open source adjacency like a hackathon or something like that. So the value of that is just super important.
One of the best connections that we made was through a conference that was for tech people in the UC system. We had a panel on the OSPO network and generated a lot of excitement, and we got 2 of our strongest allies. So if you can find out where your tech people are going to conferences, find them there and talk to them.
Zach, you look like you're going to say something.
I was going to say, like, we're not really awesome at marketing ourselves, but whenever we do try something, there's usually something that comes back to us. Like, even if it's just, 1 or 2 people, like, these grow over time. And just how valuable Curious has been to echo David, like, we've been inspired by so many other Curious members that are, better at different types of approaches than we are. And Curious is welcoming, and it's possible to join. So if you're thinking about starting an academic OSPO, definitely I would start there.
I love the point, Vessela, you were making about going to the conference where the tech people already are, which is a solid strategy for figuring out how to make inroads, especially in parts of the organization where there must be somebody, right? Just knowing where people are already congregating and finding a way to slip in there, you always find something. Are any of you willing to share something that you did in the early days of forming your OSPO that you would do differently? I'm going off script. This is not.
Yeah, I would say that we convened a cool advisory board and then never really asked them for much advice. So that's a regret I have.
Is it? I have so many questions. What do you feel like got in the way?
I think it was because we were doing so much learning, and if we had, I think that any feedback that we could have gleaned from them in the first year, I don't know if it would have, I don't know, it was such a transformative experience going from 0 to 1. Yeah. I don't think we were ready for that then. honestly. We probably are now.
My biggest regret, it's so easy, applying for a grant or any grant I've applied for. I'm new to it, I'm not a faculty, so there's actually, POSE has actually set a new precedent where OSPO directors, if their staff, can be a PI for a grant from NSF, so that's
not where I live.
Oh, really?
That might be true for them, definitely not true for me.
Oh, I thought it was at the NSF
Oh,
level.
yeah, but then Stanford gets to decide
Stanford
who's allowed to do that.
Okay, so.
But at least NSF level.
But beware, grants, I like all these things, publishing is insane in academia, and grants is another thing that's insane. All the work I've done, I tried to create an intern program, and it was like a $90K grant, and I collaborated with Carnegie Mellon and RIT, and in an organization in India, and I was so excited, I put so much effort into it, and then, thank you, sorry, no. It was brilliant. There were many other brilliant ideas, I'm sure, but it's just so painful, so much rejection in the grant area. And then somebody said,
We heard that, right? Like the entire room.
I feel pain, David.
I think a lot of people felt that way.
So then somebody else was like, I'm writing this grant. Do you want to be a co-PI? And I was like, okay, what do I have to do? They're like, nothing. We just want an open source angle to this. It's trust in law and society with AI. And open source has an angle with accountability and trust. I'm like, okay. So now I'm a co-PI, but I didn't have to do anything. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, yeah.
Let's go ahead and open up the floor for questions. So we've got one over here.
What would be the first profiles of job titles you would look for people who are setting up? What type of skills to push things through at the beginning?
You mean for staffing the
OSPO, yeah.
So I started. I was not alone. I was put into the library, and so many people already open source advocates were able to help with community building and all kinds of different workshops for education. So there was so much already done. I say we're in the golden era of our OSPO right now for the next 6 months while we have some no-cost extension, extra money. I was able to hire a program coordinator. She's phenomenal, works 30 hours a week. And then I'm full-time, and then we hired 4 student workers, and they're all unicorns, 2 undergrad, 2 grads. So to me, this is perfect. We were able to get so much done. And then the help of everybody else and the help of the librarians and all the other open source advocates, we're able to just get so much done. So that's what I recommend. I can give you job recs for the staffing positions, but that's not, I don't know if that's sustainable.
So it's an interesting, sorry, can I?
No, go ahead.
So you kind of approach it from many different ways, but I assume that if you're establishing an OSPO, you have somebody with a vision who is ready to drive that vision forward, right? So that's a very important person to have. And then you need to have somebody who is engaging with the community and connecting with them. I don't think you can have one person do both in over 5 jobs. So that's where I would start.
Ours is very sort of grassroots up, so connecting with labs all across campus and researchers. So my first hire was technical community manager, and that was one of the best moves I could have made. It was a job title that didn't exist at Stanford before, so I had to battle HR multiple times to get it made. So for any of you who have ever worked in emerging fields where this practice area doesn't exist at colleges yet, that can be very challenging. So number one, I would get a technical community manager, like the one that I was lucky enough to hire at Jessica. If I were to expand further, I would look at developer relations and research software engineer.
Yeah, a related question. Nathan Alexander from Howard University in DC. I'm a faculty member, a junior faculty member, and budgets. So we're currently funded by Sloan and the National Endowment for Humanities, but I have no concept of how much does this cost. Like, when you hire folks, when you're getting grants to faculty, we train students as well. And we're not a big campus. You know, we have 10,000 students, about 250 faculty. How much money are we talking about? That's really what I think my provost and the administrator want to know, like, how much is it going to cost us?
The grants from Sloan are $750K for 2 years.
Yeah.
So 320, what's 375 a year?
Don't forget overhead.
Yeah. So I make 150K, and then our program coordinator makes like 70K. We have some money for travel, some money for the student awards programs for a conference.
Can I add an asterisk there? Are you all planning these budgets out for 5 years? We have kind of this internal strategy. So sorry to interrupt you, David, but like, yeah, how does that all structure in terms of like, hey, for the next 5 years, we're going to pay you this amount of money?
So Sloan grants are renewable. So, you know, if you get this 2-year window and you do a decent job, and there's no guarantee this program is going to continue, right? So all of us have to worry about sustainability plans. And I think we're all approaching it a little bit differently. In some ways, if you can partner with the right people on your campus, not starting with a grant might be preferable in some ways, because you don't have that ticking clock. I mean, part of the problem with the grant is that you have to, show me all the things you did in a year for your mentions. Like, this is a 5-year story arc. So, like, if you think you're going to have these massive wins after 1 year or 2 years, that's some magical thinking. So you might be in some ways in a preferential position if you can get connected to the right. So libraries, research computing, tech transfer, research development, there are base funded core offices, and like you being a faculty member, that's another type of power that staff members don't have. I think it would be good for you to find the right partners on campus, but you are asking the right questions, I think.
Yeah, we're knocking on lots of doors to make sure that we are sustainable. I would also add among the partners procurement, and you mentioned central IT.
Yeah, it's a research computing. Yeah.
There was another topic that we started discussing yesterday in Curious, which was how can we more effectively share not just patterns and resources, but also time, activities, and services. So we'll actually form a working group and see how we can scale. So at the UC system, like, we're 6 campuses in the network, but our next step is to scale to 4 more without increasing the number of full-time employees. So it's going to be an interesting experiment. We have a plan, and I think that working group that we're forming with Curious will also test that plan further.
For us, the first 2 years were start in OSPO. The second 2 years were sustain your OSPO. There's not going to be another one. And we have a plan for my position to be in the library, but we're also budgeting like for significant cuts. So I'm no confidence right now. I'm nervous. Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting. It kind of sounds like there's an opportunity for Curious to provide some guidance for emerging OSPOs that are pre-funding. Having the grant helps. You can always start with where you are and what you have, right? Every organization, whether they're a corporation or academia, they have sort of the shadow organization. That's the group of people who actually get things done beneath the bureaucracy or whatever. And you can get pretty far in starting to make the case and getting attention with that, but you will hit a limit without some kind of thing. Okay.
Duane, I'm from the Lero OSPO, so Lero is the National Centre for Software Research. So we're in the early days of setting up OSPO, so lots of what you're saying is resonating. But Zach, you mentioned about planting a flag, show people you're here. So do you suggest like a physical presence, like an actual room where people can go to?
Yes.
Signage. We're talking about this in our OSPO now, and some of us are saying no because we already have an online presence, but really it's it's not selling us. Like people aren't really coming to us. So it's how to get that message out. Do you need the physical room?
I mean, in some ways, we have an advantage of being on a single campus, I suppose. Some of our best outreach has happened at live events. So we have a Stanford Data Science was our home for several years, and we have a little table tent that says "Ask me about open source." And at their big events, so we would get on stage for a couple minutes in front of the entire room. People come find you after. So I would say that the in-person experience definitely matters.
Yeah, we have done that, and it's such a simple thing to do. Yeah, so thanks for that.
Like Duane was saying, those other conferences where people that already have done all the work of gathering people, maybe you could get a spot on stage for 10 minutes to announce your existence and some of the things you're up to, and then you might have 10 or 12 curious people out of a couple hundred.
But either of you have a perspective on have a room with OSPO on the door versus?
We don't have a room with OSPO on the door, but we do have local in-person meetups at the university. So early on, we did a survey what people wanted, and on the Davis campus, people had a preference for in-person meetups. Our community manager, Laura, is here. I believe there was a campus where they preferred virtual meetups. Was that the case?
Yeah, at LA and San Diego. Well, it was sort of tied between virtual and in person, but everybody wanted to do virtual more often than they wanted to do in person.
So I think it really depends what your community wants. So if you have done the groundwork of discovering who is engaged in open source, you can just ask them one question, 30 seconds for them to respond easily, and then you'll know what works for them.
Yeah, I just want to add to this. So I'm at the Georgia Tech Hospital. We don't have a physical space, and we've often had people that have asked, they've said, where's your office? Can I come visit you? And, there are a couple reasons for that. Some is that we have kind of a mixed workforce. So we have actually one of our team members is remote to the campus entirely. So they're never going to be in the office. The other thing is that we found, our campus is sort of big and is split into kind of two pieces. If you have a physical office, and we do have those for other organizations we work with, that's not a guarantee that people will show up. Some of these activities like the meetups, things where you're sort of drawing people in, those I think are a lot better investment in time and resources. Obviously, if you're on campus, it's good to have a space where you can be. And I know, like myself and Cherry, who helps run our OSPO, we do have spaces where if people are looking for us, we can find them and we can meet them. But we don't need to have an explicit office. And I feel pretty strongly that you don't necessarily need one because of the way that we work now, that OSPOs are really this hybrid organization. And you really just have to be good at marketing, and you have to have these touch points of meetups and things. Francesca.
Hi, I'm Francesca from the Stanford OSPO. Thanks, Zach, for the multiple shout-outs. I have a question, but I do also want to say one super underrated battle that Zach fought that I think helped us plant our flag on the ground was getting our URL to be opensource.stanford.edu, which meant that anyone who was going to Google open source Stanford would accidentally find us anyway. So planting flag on the ground, I think naming convention and particularly a URL ended up being more helpful than I anticipated. The question I have, sort of following what Duane asked earlier, where you talked about maybe a regret you had, the flip side of that, was there something that as you continued, you decided to pivot into that wasn't in the original plan, but maybe things came up, or it was happy accident or something surprising that you decided, oh, this is something I want to attach my OSPO onto?
Love that question.
Mine is also very clear. We originally hired a technical expert as our second person, and that person was spread pretty thin, and they were not a community manager. So we pivoted in the second grant to having student ambassadors with a program coordinator that is more of a marketing, community building position, and that has just worked out incredibly. Like we had somebody that was working. The first person was technical, paid very well, very, very smart, working 20 hours a week, and the amount that I would say each student, even the undergrads, are producing more at their 10 hours a week than this individual is producing. Like it's staggering because this positive peer pressure thing is happening, and it's like we're all competing to be more productive. It's crazy. I love it.
I guess I would say realizing that we don't have to be experts in everything, and partnering with Pi OpenSci was a really good move for us and continues to be. So that's something that we want to make available to other OSPOs. Francesca mentioned yesterday the curriculum that we're developing together with Leia. So that's going to be available to all you guys, honestly. And we're covering seats for other OSPOs there. But in terms of something we didn't think about in the beginning and it ended up being great was the prize, I would say. So it's kind of shocking how motivated people get for things like this. And you get to call something like the Stanford Open Source Software Prize, like holy crap. So we have, just to give you one quick sense of what that impact was like. So we have this AI startup that's currently valued in the billions, Together AI. So they have annual revenue of like 300 million, like all of the top Stanford AI researchers go there. And, those people go in the category of people who do not have time for us, right? But an open source software project that they created was called Flash Attention. So Flash Attention is this like memory management algorithm that all the open AIs and everything ingested and used to make all their products faster and better. So we notified them with like only a couple days notice, like, oh, by the way, you guys won this prize. We have this symposium coming up. They showed up. So Treedow, who's now a professor in AI at Stanford, Princeton, and together they sent their own, like, they had people with like cameras, and we were like, oh my God, like, so the incentivization challenge and like having permits. So if you run the OSPO, like, what's to stop you from doing that? So we didn't ask a ton of permission. We just started doing this, and that ended up being really impactful.
For people who aren't familiar with the prize, the folks who showed up at that symposium, what did they receive for winning the prize?
Collapse. We also write official distinctions to their ORCID records. So that's a permanent CV marker that travels with them forever, and it has the imprimatur of the university on it. So
Those things sound very low cost.
Yes, very low cost.
Do you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
So we kind of learned from the other OSPOs, so it might seem obvious in hindsight, but some funding for events to feed people and give them coffee and prizes. So we're planning moving forward to have these events and allow people to network while getting refueled. I have a quick question for you, Zach. Are you an ORCID member? You said you're writing awards. Okay.
Yeah.
And so is everybody at Stanford, all faculty at Stanford connected to ORCID?
About 65%. Okay, so we have a system for matching authoritatively the Stanford ID and the ORCID ID, so that it exists like in SAML, I would depends on the school, but not 100% adoption. We also don't count it if you haven't connected to a system of record. So there's 15,000 ORCID records attached to a Stanford email, but a lower number that we are in systems of record that we can use. So we're shooting for that higher bar. But ORCID, for those of you that aren't familiar, I'd be happy to talk more about ORCID. You can actually connect your ORCID to your GitHub profile as well, and that's another recommended thing to do.
I've seen your hand a couple times.
Yeah, it's kind of back to this idea of planting the flag, which I think is very useful, but I know that in discussions with our colleagues at Berkeley, they're very, because Berkeley's Berkeley, and it's kind of like Stanford. But that they're very, a lot of open source, a lot of projects that come out of there that are very large and have made huge impact. And so they've been very concerned with fighting flag too hard and saying we are open source at this college. Have you felt that at all of a pushback? I know for all of us, for all of those, but I know Stanford and Berkeley would be the two particular campuses that might feel that of oh, who are you to tell us what open source is? Because we are whoever we are faculty-wise or something like that. And how have you balanced that out?
We don't have any illusions that we're the smartest people there, or that we even know what most of the open source projects are still. We've been at this for a couple of years. We think there's an iceberg effect here, and we're looking at the top 100, but there's thousands. So we have not received pushback. In general, I would say we get a lot of thank yous. We're so glad someone's doing this. It's important.
I had a fun slide when I would do my little road show to faculty, different disciplines, and try to market, where I had a librarian planting a flag, but it was also a lightning rod. And one physics professor took me up on that and was why would we got to be careful about sharing? We could be building atom bombs and stuff. I was okay, yes, those are interesting discussions. So you can have that, but mostly it's just a place for there are already so many open source enthusiasts and advocates, and they just pop up and they're okay, all the ceremonies, the conferences that you host, they're so excited to collaborate and get out of their labs.
In many ways, it's like being with 30 people trying to coordinate a lunch. The first person that says, we're going to go there, everybody's going to come along with you. Right? You just got to be willing to be the person. Vessela, anything to add?
We're not in that situation. I guess we also present ourselves as we're there to support you rather than we are open source.
We have a no mandate policy. We're never going to force you to use something open source. Very clear. We can recommend things, but
in some situations, there's a reason for that. Not to use open source.
I think Berkeley might be a little special too, in that the layer of the stack that they contribute to. Scientific Python, scikit-learn, scikit-image, all that. Everyone is building on those tools. So I would understand if they felt a little, chafed if Stanford shows up and we're hey, we're all about open source, and not recognizing the fact that we're using all their stuff. We are using all their stuff. So I would say Berkeley OSPO has a special place in the stack.
As Claire pointed out at the end of the last panel, clearly one of the things we've learned is 40 minutes is not enough. She really asked me to stay on time. So, thank you to our panelists. I know they will be here to answer questions.